Thank you all. One of the things about going towards the end of the day is, one, the exciting thing is I got confirmation because some of the things I'm going to talk about were also things that other speakers have hit upon. The bad news is some of the things I'm going to talk about are things, so consider this reinforcement, but with my spin on it. People come to me and ask me about getting into becoming a consultant, going from being what I call a real person or a real employee to becoming a consultant. And they have these questions. Should I incorporate? How do you get your contracts? How should I pay myself? What type of corporation do I have? And I tell people, and they also say, how much money can I make? I want to convert. And I tell them, you're asking me all the wrong questions. So this presentation is about the types of things that I tell people when they ask me all those legal, financial, contractual questions. So they say, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching are the 3 C's. I say no, so does Barbie. By the way, I've been living in Canada for a few years. That means my language is colorful, but it's okay, I'll be polite about it. My other thing about my advice is you're going to notice that I sometimes have conflicting advice because the real world is complicated and real life is complicated. And most of what I'm going to focus on today is about the human nature of getting into being an independent consultant. So the good news, you've decided to leave your current boss because he's an asshole. See, you notice a theme for speakers here? So now you're your own boss, right? How exciting, I'm the boss of all the things. But the bad news is your new boss is even a bigger asshole because you're self-employed and you're going to be much worse at treating yourself because you're following the dollars than your previous boss ever was, trust me. And I know this. Like, my boss makes me fly coach across the country and get delayed for 13 hours or 27 hours and makes me take the cheapest flight even though it has a connection in Chicago in March. Yeah, some people know what that means. So the good news is you get to work from home. The bad news is you get to live at work. So this is the hardest one for me. So lots of people are real-time, real people, real employees, and work from home. That's great. But that often means that you can get away from home, that there's some office or some place you can go to escape your kids, your cats, or your computers, and also the 3 C's of consulting. Not really spelled that way. But getting to live at work means a couple of things. I'm never away unless I physically go away, which often involves putting on real clothes and having a shower. So the secrets of consulting is get out of your house from time to time. The other is that your family will never treat your new job like a real job. So you're working away, you're on a webinar or a sales call, no problem at all opening that door and saying, do you know where we keep the mushroom brush anymore? Or what's for dinner is my favorite one, because my husband, who is also a consultant and working for me, he has the type of consulting job where he just goes to the same office every day. So more like a contractor, but still a consultant. And he will come in at 6 p.m. and say, what's for dinner? And of course, I'm in the middle of cutting and pasting some code from one place to another, and disrupting me there is going to cause me to fail fast. Now, if I went to his office and jumped into a meeting that he was in and said, by the way, hon, do you know why my car won't start? That would not fly. So the first C, connections. Where do you find your gigs? How do you go? And people are expecting an answer like, well, I work with this agency and I post to these boards and I send my resume and I print up flyers and I pass out business cards. I don't do any of that. I don't go get gigs. I've worked long enough that I wait for the work to come to me. Now that takes a long time to build that, but I think the secret for that is building human connections with other people as a human. So you can go to all these workshops about how to network a meeting, and it involves shaking at least 35 people's hands and passing out these cards, and how to be effective of collecting personally identifiable information about prospects, and how to get rich doing that. And that's a very successful way of doing things. I think if you want to be an independent consultant where you have repeat customers, and by repeat customers, I don't mean a contract renewal with your same customer, but as people move from company to company to company, they reach out to you and ask you for your help. That's what I consider. So that's a human repeat customer, not the corporate client. Networking is not connecting. So yes, I tell people to network to get work. I just mean going and talking to people. But then I ran into this problem, which I call the sorry I'm married problem. So I was on a board for an organization, which is one way of connecting with people, volunteering, and we were at our conference. So there's a few thousand people there, and I made it my job to go out during the breaks and not sit in the boardroom, but go out and meet people. So I'd walk up to a group of people, ask them the usual questions. Hi, I'm Karen, who are you? Where do you work? Who do you work for? Oh, do you know Jim, who works there? And I did that. And then a couple people wandered off and new people came in. So I said, hi, I'm Karen. Who are you? Guy says, Bob. Who do you work for? Names his company. Oh, what do you do there? And he turns to me and he says, sorry, I'm married. Because he thought I was hitting on him. And that turned me off going and having real conversations with people. So I'm going to have some tips in a minute about how to engage with people without using the standard questions, which we kind of had with some of us, the questions we got during the rapport as a service exercise, that can be a little bit different. The other thing for connecting with people, which we heard a little bit about, is feeling their pain. So not just the company's pain, like we're not growing fast enough or we're not making enough customers, but the individual sort of manager you might work for as a consultant, what is their pain for? Are they not meeting their numbers? Are they bleeding off personnel? Are they not getting the budget they want? Is that feeling their pain and helping that manager be successful is another way of relating to them and then reflecting that pain back. So the mentor in my life who talked about this was a gentleman by the name of Larry English, and he worked in the data quality world. But he could tell stories of stories of stories to his prospects, the people he was trying to negotiate a contract with, about pain points that he had solved for not just other companies, but other managers, so that he could relate to them on a personal basis. So you should practice saying these. I ask people, what's your biggest challenge today, just during a situation like this? So during the rapport as a service exercise, I changed that up. So I used to ask people all the time, what keeps you up at night? Which I did ask the people here. That soon turned into, sorry, I'm married conversations. So I've changed it to, what's your biggest challenge today? Like asking people what they're working on that's keeping them from being successful. I also ask people, what did you do before you became a senior entrepreneur kitten evangelist? And when I did that, I got people telling me something about their life that I could relate to, especially if I couldn't relate to their current job because I don't work in that area, like most of you here, because most of you are storage or virtualization people. I can ask you what you did before and what you're doing now. But my favorite one is, what do you do in your real life? So assuming work isn't your real life. So for me, stalking astronauts is what I do not in my real life. And most of the time, so going to launches, wearing crazy clothes, and taking pictures of astronauts in, working with my working Barbies that I take everywhere. So we also learned bring a prop. My technical Barbies are also the props that can start conversations because some crazy woman is carrying a Barbie in her backpack. So I think in networking and connecting with people, you should relate to them on a personal level, and you should be sincere, even if you're faking it. So by that I mean, there are people who are successful IT services people who go through work a room, because they've been on a course, they work a room. They ask people what they do, what projects they're on. If the answer isn't, I work at GSA or Walmart or big corporation, they move on past them because they're not a prospect for them. They're not relating to people as humans. I think that that insincerity really turns people off. It's also common for them then to ignore other independent consultants because they're frenemies. Sorry, they're frenemies, and they're not realizing that other independent consultants can be your biggest sales force. Like, I consider my entire network, whether it's my social network, my friend network, my astronaut network, my Barbie network, my running network, these are people who can introduce me to a friend of a friend, because the FOF math, the math of the graph, is the easiest way to get gigs. So I've gotten big contracts, which means money, from someone who I worked with at a company before, who was in a cyclocross organization doing racing with another guy who needed help doing data stuff. So that's sort of the Kevin Bacon effect of getting gigs. So go to the cash part. So I said that the hardest part for people getting into independent consulting is that too many people do it because they just want to make more money than they're making now, not because they've decided they want to be an independent consultant. So here's the thing. Anytime you're an independent consultant, you have a business partner, and your business partner is your family. And that's really true whether you're a regular employee, an entrepreneur, or an independent consultant. But an independent consultant situation means you're 100% responsible for earning money and bringing money in. So the great news is your spouse, significant other, or whoever you live with is going to love your new salary, because if you're doing it right, it's more than what your regular W-2 or full-time employment salary was. Your spouse will hate you when you're unbillable, because that salary is not billable. So I had a friend whose spouse would say, "It's so exciting. Every week we get a lottery check in the mail," right? Like, any of you who are new to business or something, the first time you get that check that's beyond $652.17, you practically want to frame it, right? Except it's your first check, so you're going to give it to the bank. The problem is, the same partner would say, when he was between gigs, is, yeah, he's unemployed again, because she's thinking of projects as employment. Now, you think that's bad for your spouse to be saying he's unemployed again. What's really bad is I find independent consultants telling me that. I've seen them go into LinkedIn and update their profile as unemployed at unemployed. And I'm thinking, what are you thinking? Because there's no manager on the planet saying, you know what I need? I need some unemployed people, because I've got unemployed tasks that need to be done. So I try to tell people that the hardest sort of switch to make when you become independent is no longer thinking like an employee and thinking like a self-employed person. So you need to have a salary that you're paying yourself on a regular basis, even if you're not incorporated, even if you're 1099 in the States and you're just taking it as personal income, and it's separate accounts, pay yourself a salary. You need to help your family and your other partners understand that there will be a great variety of income, even if some of those checks are lottery checks that happen every week. So that's the hard one. So Jerry Weinberg. So my #1 recommended book in the consulting thing, there's lots of them, and there are classic ones that are about the mechanics, logistics, finances of consulting, but this one's different. Gerald Weinberg wrote The Secrets of Consulting, which is subtitled The Art of Giving and Receiving Advice. So while he does a little bit about billing and everything, it's all told in parables, so it's great. But he says, the more they pay you, the more they respect you. So you've all worked for some pointy hair bosses, right, that had the least amount of respect for the people who didn't negotiate hard or didn't ask for money, but he loved to surround himself with those people because his budget dollars went further. But I have a corollary to that, is the more they pay you, the more they resent you. So the more they pay you, the more they respect you. The more they pay you, the more they resent you. Now, the guy who's hired you as an independent consultant, he loves that he's found you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have hired you and kept you. But the biggest mistake independent consultants make is telling everyone on their teams and bragging about what their billable rate is. And there's no one in the world who needs to know your billable rate except for your spouse, your business partner, your spouse, and your dog. And your dog is the only one who isn't going to tell anyone else what your rate is. Trust me on this. So, don't ever talk about your rate. It's only going to build resentment among your teams. If you're bragging about your rate, it probably means that you're chasing dollars, not project success, and not about relieving pain. Also, the more they pay you, the more they cannot wait for you to leave. And not because they don't like you, but because you're chewing up all their budget dollars. So the other issue with this is that once I negotiate my rate, I'm not going to go back and say, oh, I need more money, or, oh, now I need money for this. And I have a slide about that in a second. So let me get to this. I think everyone should take a negotiating course, whether you're an entrepreneur, a partner of an entrepreneur, because every conversation you have in life is actually kind of a negotiation, even if you're asking people, what do you do? And what did you do before that? And what are your challenges today? Everything's a negotiation. You should take a regular formal negotiating class and then start negotiating everything. Negotiate at the grocery store, practice negotiating, because I don't want you to leave any money on the table. So there's two interpretations of this. I said it's not about chasing the dollar, but also, once I negotiate my contract, the terms of it, my rates, I don't want to ever bring it up again. I mean, a contract's an important document, but it's really only there for when things go wrong. Your contract should not become an issue after you negotiate it. It's what the corporate lawyers want, and you get what you need in there, and Jerry Weinberg also says, set your rate and set your terms so you're happy either way. Don't begrudgingly bring up about this or that or the other thing. Don't leave any money on the table means don't leave it out there for constant reference. So I worked alongside another independent consultant, and he had a lesser rate than me, a significantly lesser rate than I did, and the reason I knew it is because he told everyone what his rate was while he was bragging about it. But the other thing he did is he was constantly going back to the client asking for another expense to be covered. Like, you need to pay for my laptop. You need to pay for this software. You need to pay for my internet broadband connection from home because I'm using that. And all the manager could remember is, I'm an IT manager. I don't want to keep revisiting your contract. Like, you're causing me more pain because you're just nibbling away at more money on the table. Also, I think people should work your rate. So if you're following some advice that's going to come up in a minute about setting your rate, the important thing is that you now need to act like you're charging that rate. So one of the advice I give to people new is, if you're an independent consultant and you're working alongside, a big 4.5 accounting firm who are billing out, I was one of these, billing out 21-year-olds at $800 an hour to 3-hole punch paper, seriously. If you're working alongside those, then maybe you're not going to get $800 an hour, but you should set your rate so that they respect you just as much as that. However, if you're not delivering the quality of deliverables, and I don't just mean technical quality, but that your reports are readable in English, in sentences, that they look slick because you know how to use a template, then do all that. But I find talking about money really hard. So if I'm really personally really bad at sales and closing the deal and always being closing, talking about money for me is really hard. I find this I just can't wait to get it over. So you should practice saying these things. When someone comes to you and wants you to do something for free, and they're not a big company, like let's say they run a website and they want you to blog for free for them, or they want you to write a white paper for free, or they want you to donate 10 hours of your time promoting their new blog. Say to them, how does your business model work? Now the answer is going to be, well, we're going to give you exposure, right? Everyone heard that one? It's good exposure. Well, sometimes I've taken advantage of those deals where I'm trying to get into a new community. It's not a long-term thing, but most of the time that's a sucker's bet. If it's a big company, and I have them come to me all the time because they want some of my social media reach, I say, what's your business model? But if it's a really big company, this is the most profitable statement I ever say is, what is your budget? So if you've been to a negotiating class, they say never be the first person to mention a number. Never be the first person. And so you're sitting around a table negotiating with no one mentioning a number. You don't want to be the first person. Asking a big corporation, what's your budget, can reveal all kinds of things. Okay, we need a new database designed to do a complete point of sale inventory, HR, scheduling and everything. And I say, what's your budget? And they say $10,000. And I get to say, great, let me know how it goes. Best of luck. Because I know that my rate and the work that needs to be done isn't going to make it, and maybe they'll get someone who will do that for $10,000. Other times, it's like, we'd like for you to write a white paper, and I've seen people say, I usually charge $100 to write a white paper. But what you didn't know, their budget was $35,000. And if you had just said, what's your budget, maybe the guy would have said $20,000, but you're still well ahead of the $100. What's your budget has earned me more money than all the other statements combined. So Jerry Weinberg also says, yes, you should answer almost every question, yes, I can do that, and this is what it'll take. First, people will just remember that you said yes. And the what will it take is important, because sometimes you don't have to do it for money. If you need exposure in a thing, then you trade that off. If you want to attend one of their conferences for free and have them pay for your travel or do any of that stuff, you can do that. So the last C on careers, being independent. So this is my cute. This is my Tommy, rest in peace, and this chipmunk that just annoyed the heck out of him. Now, the chippy, he was independent. He was an independent soul. He'd come up on that window and torment the cats because he knew he had this pane of glass protecting him. Because Tommy, on the other hand, thought he was independent as he chased this chipmunk all the time. But what Tommy didn't realize is that he was always going to be chasing that chipmunk. They were frenemies, very much so. The frenemy thing is, I work with some independent consultants that are chasing their definition of success, which might not be the same as my definition of success, which might not be the client's definition of success. But do you want to be the independent spirit, the true independent person who's doing what you need to do? Or do you want to be the person who's chasing the things, like Tommy had a full dish of food on the inside. He didn't need the chipmunk on there. I say that being independent is probably one of the loneliest things in the world if you're truly independent working as a single sole proprietor or own a corporation of one, because you're always fighting the battle and the war alone. Sometimes you can team up and partner with people on things. That's why I do a lot of co-presenting and co-authoring and speak at conferences so that I can team up with other people. But it's also the fact that for some people, that's not enough. And I think a lot of people who go independent don't realize how being able to be part of a team, like working on a project, is sometimes more fulfilling for them than being an independent. Jerry Weinberg says, in Secrets of Consulting, here's how you set your rate. You should plan on 25% of your working hours being billable, 25% doing professional development, 25% doing sales and marketing, and 25% doing absolutely nothing at all. So most people who do their first budget for being independent say, okay, there's about 2,000 work hours in a year, and I'm currently making $100,000 a year, so my billable rate should be about $50 an hour. Except that this is the reality of it, is that you really need, using this math, is you need to have a rate of $200 an hour. And that's not taking into account how smart you are, what a celebrity you are, how much you know, what's your expertise, what the rest of the market does. And so most people go into this setting a rate that's way too low, and then people take advantage of that because when you quote this rate, then they're going to think maybe you're not good enough because you're not billing as much as this other smart person. So if you set your rate so that you plan on the 25, 25, 25, 25, and then you end up billing a lot more than that, which, by the way, you will, then your rate works out really well for you. So I said 25% of your time should be professional development, but professional development's everything, meaning getting better at what you know, learning new things, taking risks by meeting new people and going into those things, also important. But here's your problem. Your new boss is both an asshole and a tightwad when it comes to doing professional development. And so is your business partner, by the way. So, this was sort of my early career. I told the story last night that I became independent because I fell into it because the consulting company I worked for went out of business, and I just became independent overnight, something I thought I didn't want, but I really wanted. I started doing the math. Taking a week off to go to a conference times your billable rate, it can be tens of thousands of dollars of walking away from that billable stuff. So for the first of all, I was young and I needed the money, but I was young and I was making a lot of money, and I basically didn't take time off to go to conferences because I had a great contract. I was billing like 60 hours a week at an enormous rate, and I was getting a lottery check every week. But I finally realized that going to courses, going to a conference, taking an actual week off, any of those things were important to me to continue to be billable and sustain that model. Community is everything. We've heard a lot about community. I think it's important for independents to engage in community, not just join a community, not just attend a meeting, but get to meet everyone in the community. So one of the reasons why I'm here is most of you are a new community for me. And by the way, you're great. But most of you are a new community. And that's something that I just find so exciting about meeting other people, learning that some of their problems are the same, some are different. Start a community. Like, I look back to when I started my career. To start a community, it meant starting a user group, which meant signing a contract with a professional association. I mean, that's how things were done then. Now we have meetups and tweetups, and I just go start a meetup, and I'm going to have like maybe 4 meetings, and then we'll decide whether or not that's going to take, or whether the community needs all those meetings, or do a virtual meeting. I lucked out early on. I inherited an online mailing list that someone decided it was too hard moderating assholes on the internet, and because someone was always wrong on the internet and needed to be corrected. And I inherited it because I didn't want it to die. And that turned out to be a good 15 years of managing a whole bunch of online communities, which now fast forwards into me doing a lot of stuff through social media and getting a lot of opportunities to do things through social media. Support a community. So there are people who brag about their rates and how much money they're making, and who go in and don't financially or morally or ethically support communities. And I think we should. And not just because you're buying a sponsorship and everything, but by supporting them, by volunteering and hoping those things happen. So I think you should make connections, have a great career and cash, but don't let your new boss ruin it all, your new boss being you. You need to give more that you can get, and that's my secrets to consulting. And this is Coco, who would always find money. He was our service dog, even though he was a cat, who could sniff out cash sitting in places and dig it out. So I want to thank you, and I'd love to hear, as we go on our break, what other career advice for independent consultants you have, or living life, because I want to hear about your experiences and the lessons learned that you have. Thank you.